Okay, that's better. Thank you so much. Hey, Chief, how are you? And I see the attendees are populating again, so that's awesome.
You got it.
Yay! It worked. Thank you, everyone, for your cooperation, your patience, your understanding. And I see our attendees are jumping all back in. Very excited to see that they're here. So we'll give them just a few more minutes to populate, and we'll get started.
It wouldn't be a Zoom without a little glitch.
You're absolutely right. While they're populating, I'm going to grab a pen. Sorry. Okay, so as I was saying, thank you very much, everyone, for your patience, your understanding, and your assistance and cooperation. Welcome to our Cannabis Town Hall for West Orange. This is our second, and I know Jacqueline Ferraro was with us during our first one as well, as was attorney Mark Moon. So happy to see you joining us here again. And Charlana, as were you. I remember you did sit on our panel. Good to see you again. And thank you for joining us. So we're here today just to discuss what the new changes in the legislation for adult use medicinal dispensary mean for our township. I will share that we have discussed the ordinance changes and have a draft that we will be presenting to our council for consideration. And so this forum is in effect, again, just a place where we can come and become better educated, both for those of us in governance, since we have to create this new ordinance, as well as for the public to understand what this means to our township, and more importantly, what it does not mean. So I would like to start with a round of introductions. Everyone, my name is Cindy Matute-Brown, Council President, West Orange Township, and Mr. Mayor, thank you for joining us. You're muted.
You'd think I would know that by now, but as was mentioned, we're all still learning this. But
Yeah.
Thank you for putting this together, Council President. Thank you for inviting me. As you mentioned, we are at the stage of this process where these type forums are as educational to us as it is for those watching and viewing from home. We've gotten a crash course in what the state guidelines are, what some other municipalities and some other states are doing, with great thanks to Mark Moon from our office, law office here today, for all the work he's done. So the township is committed to moving this forward. We trying to figure out the best way to structure it to serve our town and what our expectations are. But I appreciate everyone being on this forum. Again, Council President, thank you for putting it together. Mark's contributions, our police chief is here, and obviously hoping to learn a little bit of what some of the residents believe as well. But we are preparing and interested in moving this forward and getting a draft to the council as quickly as possible.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Chief Abbott.
Yes, President.
Please, we're just doing a round of introductions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you for including me in this. I think, to have a law enforcement perspective is important for the community, and I'm eager to learn as much as I am to impart.
Wonderful. And for everyone's sake and understanding, the chief has been a part of the process with the ordinance drafting. So obvious for him to be here, and for the community to hear from him as well. Mark Moon, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Mark Moon. I'm an attorney at TrenkIsabel. Richard Trenk is the township attorney, and I'm one of his partners. I participated in assisting in preparing what has now been the draft ordinance based on my review of the state statute that was adopted earlier this year. And I look forward to discussing and addressing any questions that anyone might have.
Wonderful. Thank you. Jacqueline, I'll kick it off to you, and then you can circle around to everyone from your panel, please.
Great. Thank you, Council President, Mayor, Chief. It's great to see everybody. We're very happy to be here tonight. My name is Jackie Ferraro, and I am co-founder of the Cannabis Advisory Group. We are a policy group who works with, or I should say, we're an advocacy group who works with many states throughout the tri-state area in the Mid-Atlantic region. We have our group consists of thought leaders throughout the country, and we put this group together back in the fall to help to share resources that we have. We have a robust group of panelists today who are part of the Cannabis Advisory Group, and you'll learn that each of us has expertise in different levels of the cannabis industry. So we're hoping to be able to answer some questions. There's a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncertainties right now until the rules and regulations are adopted. But we're here to share whatever knowledge that we can to help guide you through this process. I will introduce Alana. Next up.
Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Alana Han. I'm an attorney at Cape Breton Scatcherd. I work in the cannabis law. I also obviously work at the Cannabis Advisory Group with all these other great panelists. And I'm really excited as a New Jersey native to dig into these regs, or what we have anyways.
Wonderful.
Chuck Lantini, one of our directors here at the advisory group.
Thank you, Jackie. Madam President, Mr. Mayor, thanks for having us. I'm Chuck Lantini. I am a New Jersey-based land use planner. Been around these parts for better parts of 25 years now. I have my own practice here in Central Jersey, and I'm also the president of the New Jersey chapter of the American Planning Association. And since 2018, I've advised some towns on the medical license process, and in 2019, I've also represented the cannabis companies. So I've been on both sides of the aisle. So thank you for having us.
Thank you, Chuck. Mr. Beau Whitney.
Madam President, Mr. Mayor, my name is Beau Whitney. I'm the founder and chief economist for Whitney Economics. I'm based out of Portland, Oregon. I'm one of the early adopters of legal cannabis. I've served on advisory committees at the regulatory level, provided inputs on policies at the state and local levels, as well as the national level, and even advised heads of state in other countries on deploying cannabis legally. And so I'm really honored to be here and happy to share some of my views today.
Thank you, Beau. Charlana.
Good evening. My name is Charlana McKeithen. Thank you for having me. I am the founder and executive director of Cannabis Laws Matter. I'm also amongst the members of Cannabis Advisory Group. And I also do advocacy work in other states like Delaware, who is trying to push for legalization this year. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlana. Diana.
Hi there. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this panel. My name is Diana McElroy, and I am the community outreach specialist for Terrescend, New Jersey. We're an MSO, and we have operations throughout the country, including Canada. And right now we have a vertically integrated license in New Jersey, which means that we could grow, process, and sell our product. And I'm very excited to take part in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you all for the round of introductions and for agreeing to participate, give up your time to help us learn more about what we need to learn to make sure that whatever choices that we make for our township are both in the best interest of health and safety, first and foremost, and that we're able to produce something that's not restrictive. And so here you are to share with us your expertise. I want to share with everyone that I had the opportunity to join Diana McElroy. Terrescend has a dispensary in Maplewood. And it was really an interesting experience to be able to come into what literally looked like a Tiffany's, as Diana mentioned. So for those, and I encourage my council colleagues who are on, locally, if you'd like to join, please feel free to reach out to Diana to go take a tour and see what this is really all about. At this point, I'd like to, Jackie, if you can start with policy, or Alana, I'm not sure who wants to discuss the policy, but floor's open.
Sure. No, that's great. Lana and I will do a little breakdown of where we are at today. And Chuck, and we welcome the other panelists to add some color to it, because we know this will be a fireside chat type discussion. So obviously, the municipalities are tasked with opting out, coming up with ordinances and some heavy decisions to make as to what adult use will look like in towns. And the 2018 and 2019 RFA, which I was a part of from a strategic advisory role, the future RFAs will look different from where I can tell. The 2018, 2019 applicants were asked to provide letters of support and obtain letters of support with towns where they'd like to operate their businesses, and also secure site control, whether it be a retail location or a cultivating facility. So that was needed in the usually 200 plus application that would be submitted to the Department of Health at the time. So now that we have an adult use bill, which is quite extensive, we feel that there is now a lot of power for the municipalities to really chart their own course as to how many dispensaries, what part of town, how many cultivating facilities, etc. So there's certainly a lot that can be done, and at the municipal level, which is great news for municipalities. I will hand it over to Alana to talk about the license types that will be available for adult use market.
So they came out with 6 license types. One of them being the traditional grower, but the issue with the grower currently is that it's going to be capped for the first 24 months at 37 growers, and then they will reassess, the regulatory commission will reassess that and see, based on supply and demand and such, whether to allow, or how much more should allow licensing more growers. Then they're going to also have a processor. A processor that's the class 2, and a processor is somebody who would take the whole flower product and they would do things like they would extract the product, make it into vaporizers, edibles, tinctures, different kind of products like that. Then you will also have a wholesaler, which is a class 3, and that'll be a license type where they just do the wholesaling of the product. So from the grower to the processor, or they would also do it to the dispensary. There's also a class 4, that would be the distributor. The distributor would be the connection between the processor and the retailer. And then finally, not finally, class 5 is, you're going to have your cannabis retailer, which everyone knows is the dispensary. There'll be obviously still medical as well as the adult use. And then you have your class 6, which is going to be cannabis delivery. And that will be, delivering products from the cannabis retailers or a non-storefront retailer. So somebody who would only be selling through a delivery service. I think I covered all of the.
Yes, thank you. And just to add on to the delivery license, retailers have the ability, the current retailers and actually the future retailers will have the ability to deliver from their dispensaries. And delivery is happening throughout the state. That's something that can't be prohibited in any towns. And if, say, for example, Terrescend delivers to Montclair, or West Orange or wherever they are delivering to, the host town, which in this case would be Maplewood, would obtain the tax from that delivery, no matter where they deliver it to. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Could I just jump in and ask a question to Alana before we move on? You said that there was a cap of 37 growers, and then there would be a reassessment. Is that cap include any pending licenses from 2018, 2019? And so then if it does, what does that really mean for those who are interested in applying for a cultivation license?
Yes, so the 37 is going to actually include the current operators right now as well. So that is going to lower the amount of available license for cultivation. But the way we kind of see it here in New Jersey is, and I'm sure, you know, Diana could probably speak to this, is there is a large demand and not a large supply currently. That's kind of our issue here. So I think that it's very likely that the commission is going to be expanding that to be able to cover all of these, you know, the amount of patients that want to access, as well as then the adults who would like to access.
Well, my understanding is that they're not doing a cap on micro licenses. So
That is correct.
yes, so that's going to allow for anyone under 25,000 square feet of space to grow. They're not capping them on the amount of plants within that space, but they are right now currently capping them on less than 10 employees. But my understanding also is that the law states that after a year, they could revisit and reapply.
Yes.
So thank you for that. Do we know, and I do want to discuss the micro licenses. There was a question that I'll read to everyone. I'm not sure if everyone saw it in the chat. Please, for those who are in attendance, I ask that you put your questions in the Q&A so that any one of the panelists can see and answer your questions directly as well. So do we know how many are pending of the 37? So a realistic number of what's available right now? Do we have an estimate?
So to add on to what Alana had mentioned, so we have 12 cultivators who, the 12 current operators have a vertical license, which includes a cultivating license. We are waiting on the 2019 applicants to be awarded, which will include a total of 15 dispensaries, 5 in each region. Chuck, keep me honest here. 4 verticals and 5 verticals and 4 cultivating.
Right.
So that leaves us with
19 total to go.
19 to go.
Yeah.
And since there's not going to be a cap on the micro licenses, we don't know what that looks like. In other words, we don't know what the commission will do in terms of the next RFA and what they'll call for. Will they call for all micro business licenses, a little mixture of retail and cultivating? Will they call for 1 or 2 more verticals? We're not quite sure exactly what that looks like. But we know micro businesses are certainly on the forefront, and Charlana can speak more in length on that.
And
Go ahead.
one thing
Sorry.
Sorry. One thing I actually was going to transition into, which was great that Diana had kind of brought us into it, was the micro businesses, because I do think that's really an important aspect here, because it really helps start up small businesses, which we also know that, you know, this is an expensive industry to become a part of. So with the micro businesses, they're trying to make that about 25% of all license issued. And that would allow the holder of that to employ no more than 10 employees. They, as of right now, they can possess no more than 1,000 cannabis plants each month. And they, a cannabis retailer would be allowed to sell about 1,000 pounds a month. And then with that, 51% of those owners, directors, and officers must be residents of the municipality where that micro business is going to be located. So it creates a lot of opportunity in the municipalities who allow businesses.
So Alana, and that was one of the questions that was asked. Someone asked in the chat, will we be considering West Orange residents as first choice for licenses? Can we walk through the process of where the township would come in considering licenses versus the state, right? It's the state decides, and where's the township on that?
So the way it kind of looks right now is you will, as an applicant, you'll send your application into the state. You know, they're the top of that function. And then once they see, you know, you meet all the requirements required by the law, you know, the minimum, then they will transfer your application to the municipality. And then there's a time frame, and again, somebody can correct me here. I believe it's 14 days.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. 14 days from when the state gives it to the municipality, they'll have to approve, deny, and get that to the applicant. And then, you know, if it's a denial, they'll have to give them a reason. And then there's some due process after that if they're denied.
Right.
So to answer the question, will West Orange be considering residents? It depends on the license. So the micro business license requires, you said 51% of those licenses have to be for residents in the township.
So 51% of the owners of a company?
Okay.
So
of the owners of the company have to reside.
correct. So it would have to be,
Also has to be employees also.
Say again?
Employees also, they have to be residents for at least 2 years.
Okay.
Okay.
And now Charlana is going to also go into the micro business because I know she's the expert here on that.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that. Good to
Well,
know.
I think we're all experts. But just to dive a little deeper, the micro license will have the same 6 classes: dispensary, cultivation, manufacturing, delivery, wholesale, distribution. So they all have the same six classes, and 15% will go to minority owned, 15% women owned, and 15% disabled veteran owned. So they will, their applications will have a little more priority, and also impact zones. If you find space in the impact zone, you will have priority also. And again, as Alana said, the space can't be more than 2,500 square feet.
And can you talk a little bit about the application costs, the differences between the application costs and the capital, I would imagine, versus that of a traditional license? How does that make it more affordable for communities who've otherwise been negatively impacted and marginalized because of the prohibition? How does that micro business help?
Well, for the application fees, it's supposed to be at least 50% less than a regular license that you would apply for. These are smaller licenses, so it's supposed to be a lot more affordable. Some of the particulars will come in once they do regulations. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So once they start the regulations, we'll have a little bit more understanding. One of the hardest parts of this is property, and how to secure property for the application. Depending on how long the process takes. What we've seen with the 2018, 2019 license that have been held up in court, that it's cost a lot of money to hold on to properties until a decision is made. So those are some of the things we have to wait for the regulations to let us know what's going to happen.
So it could still be, it could potentially still be cost prohibitive because of the access to land that you know, someone who makes the application would have to prove and provide, you know, whether it's a mortgage or a lease throughout the process of the application, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Right, and even down to things you need like security, it'll be on a smaller scale, but you're still paying, what you would normally pay for security. But the good things, not one, is some good things about the micro license is that you can start off small, but then over time roll into a larger license, a regular license, and a vertical license. So that's the nice thing about a vertical. They're not limiting you throughout your time with a permit.
Are there, and I know this is a question that was, or a statement that was made, micro businesses will need some type of subsidies because the taxes, there's no way that they would be able to operate financially requiring retail or cultivation space. Is there any discussion that you've heard of at the state level with regards to any subsidies for micro business licenses? So for instance, there are business loans for women, minority women, and all types of other loans. Are those, I mean, obviously not from the federal level, but from the state level, would someone be able to apply for that type of a business loan in regards to applying for a micro business license?
Well, as of right now, what we have to remember is still federally illegal. So certain types of loans they would not be able to receive. From my understanding, they're trying to look at grants created within the cannabis industry from, larger size entities. Feel free to chime in if you have more information, but that's my knowledge.
So I know that there are funds that are opened specifically dealing with this. I know that Jason Wild, our chairman, actually started one. I believe it was $100 million fund where they're specifically going for minority owned businesses because they want to ensure that there's a fair playing field in this industry. So there are people who are pursuing avenues, not your typical banking, but investment avenues.
Yeah. So the typical EDA programs for women and minority businesses are not going to apply, right?
No, it's going to take some private funding or
That and we'll see what happens with this idea of the social excise fee, the tax on the actual harvest.
Yeah.
We'll see if they institute that, how they institute it, and then the program is meant to, whatever money's captured from that is going to go directly into things like this. So there's still a lot of unknowns with the micro license, a lot of support that's needed with the micro license, not just in finances, but I think in workforce development and the like, that I know our group and others are committed to kind of seeing through. So still a lot of unanswered questions though.
Yeah, agreed. And just to clarify, I know there are a few questions coming in on the micro licenses. So the 25% will be on all parts of the supply chain. So 25% retail, 25% cultivating, 25% processing. And the impact zones are going to be an important aspect to this. Just to break that down. So employ no more than 10 employees, possess no more than 1,000 cannabis plants each month, and the retailer no more than 1,000 pounds each month, which, by the way, 1,000 pounds is a lot. So to start off for a year, that's not bad. That's a good way to kick off. And as Charlana mentioned, that license could be expanded after a year and with the approval of the commission. In terms of fees, still unknown what that looks like. In the last RFA process, this was just vertical licensing, which is the cultivating process in retail. Under that umbrella, that was $20,000. If an applicant was not awarded a license, they would be refunded $18,000 back. But again, this is going to look different. So it's still unknown as to what that application cost will be with the micro business.
And just to follow up on and put it kind of in perspective a little bit, right now we have over 100,000 medical patients, and I think we're at about 16 dispensaries, and that's where we're there's a lot of restraints on the dispensaries right now to get product to the medical patients. So having the number of facilities that we're talking about, including the micro businesses, is not a lot for us to get started and up and running. And we haven't even started seeing an RFA process yet. So it's going to take time for us to get the retail licenses up and going. So.
Thank you. I know there was a question with respect to the challenges with traditional banking. So that is a question that has come up amongst my council colleagues, the concern that this is an all cash business. If you can speak to that, that would be great.
Yeah, part of this is Beau. So part of this can be addressed through the federal easing of banking restrictions. And there's some proposed legislation at the federal level called the Safe Banking Act. Unfortunately, it's getting caught up a little bit in the politics of things going on in Washington. The leadership on the Senate side, for example, wants to do a more comprehensive cannabis reform bill and doesn't favor incremental reform such as the Safe Banking Act until they've been the Senate's been able to digest what comprehensive means. And so for right now, we haven't seen any proposed language for the comprehensive one. So the Safe Banking Act, as much as it would be helpful for the industry, it's kind of being delayed right now because they don't want to do incremental change. But what that Safe Banking Act would do is it would give you access to more traditional finance streams, which, you know, you could have bridge loans, you could have access to capital, you could even go into the public markets. And so it just gives you more options and it reduces your cost of capital because there's not as much risk. And so by reducing your cost of capital, you reduce your interest payments and all this. So it's extremely beneficial. That's not even mentioning the public safety aspect of this is when you're dealing with a cash business, there is the propensity for potential robberies and theft. And so that puts the employees in harm's way. So the Safe Banking Act not only would help the businesses to just manage their businesses, but would also address some of the public safety issues.
Also, in addition to that, you have 1080E. These organizations have very little that they can deduct for expenses for the business, so that takes a toll on the organization also. So that's the bill that. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Beau.
Yeah. The 280E tax is a IRS tax code which was implemented about 40 years ago, which tried to provide disincentives towards conducting illicit activities. A lot has gone on and a lot has changed and evolved in the cannabis industry right now, to the point where a revisit is definitely appropriate of this. But what it does is it disallows common business deductions on your federal taxes to where it's cost prohibitive to actually run a business. Common business deductions such as legal fees, marketing, labor, and the like. And so when you can't write off that at the federal level, it increases your federal tax liability. And in some instances, it's in excess of 50 or 60%, in some cases 70 or 80%. So, when you're running a tight ship, when you don't have a tremendous amount of revenue, and you're paying such a high federal tax rate, it really makes it difficult to expand your business, provide health care or other benefits to your employees, makes it difficult to hire employees and the like. So the combination of the Safe Banking Act, where you provide a public safety issue, reduce your cost of capital, and then reduce your federal tax burden, that's a 1-2 combination, which would be very favorable, not only for businesses in New Jersey, but cannabis businesses across the country.
And that's not to deter anyone from going down this path, but you need to know what you're getting into. And so that's why you brought that up.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. It's important to understand, your cost of business before you go into it, because a lot of times when you don't have the traditional access to capital, a lot of friends and family, a lot of 401ks go into funding your business. And given it's still federally illegal, you're not given bankruptcy protection either. So if you aren't successful, then you may lose a lot more than just your business.
And my understanding is credit unions are more accessible as a form of banking because they don't, yeah. And also for the 280E, dispensaries are hit a lot harder than the grows. So they can't deduct any of their like general operating expenses.
And that's why it's just want to say that's why the work we do and the work the advocates do is not just state and local level. We have to do work on a federal level because it's just a trickle down effect.
Yeah.
I recently presented 280E analysis to Senator Booker's office, and they understand the issue, and they're appreciative of having actual data out there. But it's just difficult, once again, in the current environment, to make these incremental changes at the federal level where it's desperately needed. It's not something that one can do at the state level. One thing that can be done, though, at the state level is to allow for common deductions, kind of go away from the 280E model and allow for common deductions on your business taxes. A lot of states that have deployed cannabis programs, such as Oregon, where I'm at, they have allowed for this, and it's been helpful to provide a little bit of tax relief at the state level to the cannabis operators.
Thank you. And Diana, just if you could speak to experience, just this process, thinking more granular level for someone, let's say if we permitted a dispensary here, what typically is the process for a dispensary owner with respect to monies being deposited, and what are the challenges that they face? I know that there's a safe that's required to be maintained on premises. Can you talk to that, please?
So one thing I will say, because we are such a regulated industry, our security measures have to be way greater than I believe any other building including banks. I know we're regulated by the DOH, now the CRC. We are mandated to have cameras all throughout the space. We have live feed cameras to the DOH. Anywhere where there's product or money is being recorded at all times. Similar to a bank, when we have a money pickup, it's a nondescript car that's taken off premise. Everything is extremely secure. We have a safe, like a bank would have a safe, and that is done by the standards of the DOH. So is there risk? Possibly, but I believe we're so mindful. We have security on staff. Also, we have security buttons underneath the counter that go directly to the police station, so there is no delay. Whereas with a call station, you would have a delay in that process. So, we're very mindful of our employees' security and that of our patients.
Thank you for that. I do see some answers that are being provided in the Q&A. So one of the questions by one of our residents, maybe Mayor Parisi, you can tackle this one. Is West Orange actively working with realtors to bring dispensaries to the town?
No, not yet. I think it's a little premature until we finalize the direction the administration is looking to go, and then ultimately this has to be approved by council, and I suspect that there'll be lengthy discussions among council. So until we get a confirmed and approved ordinance, I think it's a little premature. But we do see, when you look at histories in other states, we see the economic benefit from a planning perspective. So at some point it would be important to consider that and work with realtors, but I think we have to get an approved ordinance before we get to that point.
Thank you. Go ahead, Charlana.
Little clarification, as a broker realtor, but it's more in reverse, whereas the person who wants to come to the town identifies someone that wants to, that's local, that can tell them what properties have been approved by the municipality that falls within, whether they decide on an impact zone or not, but within the how close you can be to schools, daycares, and churches and things of that nature. So there's restrictions, and the township has to decide if they're going to be a little more lenient on those restrictions. And once that's decided, then you move forward.
Thank you, Charlana. I'd like to get into the space of zoning, Chuck, if you will. It's one of the questions that I know I've received. And when we initially discussed this at our town hall for medicinal, when the Jake Hodnick legislation was passed, there was a lot of resistance from some parents with respect to it's going to be too close to schools. Or can you talk to the zoning and how most municipalities move forward in zoning for green spaces, or, I don't know, do you zone particular properties, or is it, how do you move forward?
So, I look at this question more from a holistic perspective, as somebody who's very familiar with the municipal land use law, how your master plan and zoning is currently set up, and really the kind of future game plan you're looking to get to. I mean, so the way I can't speak to how most municipalities are handling this, because I think most municipalities are saying, well, wait a second, we're going to hit a timeout button and we're going to wait to see what the state tells us to do, if they tell us what to do at all. And then we'll come back to you and figure out how we're going to do it. So, but I think, from the way my towns have handled it and the way I've seen it handled best in other regulated markets, is that, you have to view, the use in its discrete components. When you're talking about retail, you're talking about both the medical retail and adult use retail. And yes, you can split the hairs on that and say, if somebody wants to do a holistic wellness center that is medical only, they're welcome to do that. And you can treat that zoning differently and more akin to a pharmacy wellness center than you would, say, an adult use perspective, where it's like a bar or packaged goods store, for in its basic sense, right? I'm just talking about zoning, not necessarily how you should or shouldn't view it, but in a large sort of category perspective, that's how I kind of treat it. And then the cultivation, manufacturing, testing, all the ancillary businesses that come out of that. I mean, all those are great for your industrial manufacturing zones. So, I think, when you're looking at, the locations, I think areas in town where you can handle the traffic, because we do see a lot of traffic associated with these businesses on the retail side. That should be, the way to consider it, versus, where I'm looking at some towns with small downtowns with parking problems and access to parking issues. That might not be, the best spot to put it right in the center of that, but maybe on a site that has available parking and is more accessible by multiple modes of transportation. And I say that, consider people on foot too, because, people who don't own cars need to have access to medication as well. So I'm really not sure how much guidance the CRC is going to give us in this perspective. I feel like, more than how they're going to tell you how to deal with zoning, they're going to come up with sort of the administrative guidance, I hope, where they're looking at your local application process. How do you process people coming into the town? Do you create a local support initiative where you set forward guidelines for how a company is going to come in? Alana had indicated earlier that the state is sort of the top of the food chain. I, as a municipal planner my whole life, and in a home rule state, feel that municipalities are the top of the food chain here, because the legislature has given you all the tools, and you still have them through your municipal land use law to say yes and no, and where and how. And they went as far as to say you can guide operational concerns, you can guide hours of operation, you can have your own local application process, your own fees. Now, I'll caution you on that, and I'm sure Beau will talk some about this too. And I hope the state will provide some guidance on host agreements, because I mean, I don't think it's fair to, you know, what some towns have done in other states to the cannabis industry. So there's a fine balance between mitigating local impacts and getting what you need out of it in terms of local workforce development and access to jobs, because the dispensaries are one source of jobs, yes, but the cultivation and manufacturing have far more jobs associated with it. So, you know, you really got to kind of split the hairs on all this stuff and utilize the tools that you know best. You guys have planners and economic development people, and you have initiatives where you're trying to revitalize certain areas, both industrial and retail areas. You know, work those. And then, of course, you got to consider the buffers, right? And, you know, especially with the drug-free school zone stuff, I know the state went silent on that during the medical process and kind of left it up to the towns. But, you know, you still have to consider the federal illegalities and not paying attention to those, not only upset residents, but, you know, bring prospective trouble down the road. So I think absolutely you got to pay attention to that, and then figure out how your residents want to move forward. Do you incorporate all those other components outside of schools? I don't know, daycares and churches and the like. You know, you start doing that, some towns you don't have a single spot of land that's not encapsulated by a buffer zone. So, you know, you got to split hairs and really look at some maps and start doing some analysis on it.
Yeah, just to supplement that a little bit, it's important to be responsible with the time, place, and manner regulations. But also, a lot of times you need to secure the property before you can even go through this process. So for the planners, they need to be mindful of the fact that these people are paying rent and the like throughout the process, throughout the application process. So becoming as efficient as possible and processing those permits and reviewing of blueprints and the like, I think that's really critical just to give the business operators the fighting chance. You know, in some examples, in other states, it would take up to a year or 2 years to even get the review of the permits, you know, and review of all of the documents. And that's a little bit egregious in terms of, you know, not partnering with the industry, an industry that's trying to bring you jobs.
Yeah, and I like, you know, just to, you know, put some finer points on that. As somebody who's been approached and by multiple cannabis industry folks wanting to locate in one of my towns, you know, and you start to interview and you start to have dialogue on how they're going to come in the community, be part of the community. It really, you know, to Beau's point, being a partner with the right operators is really important, I think, because then you know there's not only transparency in your process, but there's you know, delivery on the expectations that you've talked about.
I think one other aspect of this is that it's important to be reasonable with your fees and fee structure without being you know, egregious once again, because you're going to derive the economic benefit in the community through the hiring, through the taxes, and through the multiplier effect, the ripple throughout the economy of that economic activity. So you'll more than make up for it on the back end once you get these operators up and running, rather than you know, basing your revenue solely on the fees and the processing and the applications.
I wanted to also, on that note, ask you to please share with respect to the taxes that we as a municipality are able to impose on the different types of licenses, what does a township, what can we predict or anticipate as revenue? I don't know what variables go into that, but let's say if we do, obviously the cultivation, because it's the largest, I would assume would render greater tax revenue for a township. What are there figures as to what a municipality can anticipate?
So I look at things not only at the state level, but at the national level. It's kind of tough to predict tax revenues for specific jurisdictions from my perspective, because each one is somewhat different. Each state is different. Each regulatory structure is different. So I don't have a clear-cut answer for you. There's no real model because each state is unique in the way that they deploy these programs.
My understanding it's 3% for the municipality that I think the dispensary is located at, up to 3%. But I have to verify that. But that's the number that keeps ringing in my head.
I believe it's 2%.
Is it 2%?
The uniform percentage is 2%, except for sales or transfers from wholesalers, which is 1%.
That's right.
That's the cap.
Okay.
So the cultivation mark is also 2%?
Yes. So the only thing that's capped at 1% are
Oh, and he froze.
Wholesalers is the only one capped.
Okay, thank you.
At 1%.
Right. Everything else is 2.
I don't know where I got the figure in my head that it was a 3%. Maybe it was just wishful thinking.
Well, I think we were all arguing for 3 up to 5. You know?
True.
I mean,
Well, I can speak just knowing from some retailers, dispensaries can generate 10, 15 million a year from a retail location. I can't speak so much on cultivating, but maybe others can on the panel. But
Well,
just-
are they a cultivator and a distributor, or are they like strictly selling to their own dispensaries? You know, that's something to consider as well.
That's true.
Because if they're wholesaler, then, you know, there's more products going out.
Mm-hmm.
right.
There is a question in the Q&A that reads, are micro licenses available to people who want to do this as a cottage business from their home in the way that someone starting a business is selling at a farmer's market might do? Does anyone have an answer for that?
Definite no.
No.
Yeah, I mean, unless your zoning is going to allow homegrown, I don't see how you're going to do it. But
Unfortunately.
Which right now the state does not allow homegrown at all, from my understanding. I know New York allowed up to 6 plants. So, and you're not going to make much money, even, you know, let's say New Jersey adopted their plan of 6 plants. So no, it's a very, we are seed to sale state, which means every single seed that comes into your cultivation center has to be accounted for. Every single plant has a tag on it, and the state follows the plant through the process. So if we dispose of a plant, that's put in the system as well. So there's no homegrown possibility to make money, unfortunately.
yeah,
I spend enough of our time fighting the homegrown marijuana sales now. I don't think we want to go down that path.
Yeah, yeah. I would say, you know, just as a point of interest as a planning policy nerd, you know, what would be the case if you had a property over a certain size in a residential zone and you created a conditional use permit upon which a 2,500 square foot garage could be licensed by the state? Maybe in that case, but you would have to do some really fine-tuned zoning work that I don't know if I'm ready to do just yet.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, Chuck. You being experienced in this arena. If you're not willing to travel, we're not there. Chief, I wonder if you can answer the question with respect to, in the Q&A, the first part is, do we have a breakdown of how many residents have been impacted by the war on drugs And then the secondary follow-up, should the town support this proposal, which I hope we can we create a community program to either incentivize or encourage direct outreach to those with prior convictions for cannabis charges to provide a somewhat path forward towards restorative justice and help those who may not have been able to return to employment?
So I was in the middle of typing away an answer to that, which I'll get back to in a minute. That's okay. I want to, in case anybody's reading the thread, they can see it later on. But in any event, so that would be a very difficult metric, because if you think about it, residents from West Orange get arrested elsewhere, so they're impacted by this, and people from other towns come into West Orange, they get arrested, in the war on drugs over many, many years, the failed war on drugs, I might add. So it's a metric we couldn't cull from our database. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it would take literally a hand search of every record to establish that and give that information. So it's next to impossible, or pragmatically speaking, it's impossible. So for the second point, that's a pretty cool idea. I would look to some of the other panelists to see how we might accomplish that. It seems like it's more of a licensure issue than a law enforcement issue.
I think
I
it's
like it.
the state law too. I mean, I know for us, for any hiring that we do, every single employee has to pass a background check, whether they're, hands-on with the product or not. If you're an employee of the company, we're mandated to do a background and fingerprinting check through the state.
So in that case, does that completely eliminate the possibility of someone, let's say, that was arrested and charged for personal use? What's the restriction for someone who has a prior?
Currently, as the state stands, I believe they're exempt, meaning they can't. But hopefully, maybe the CRC will revisit this, because we all know this has been a huge social inequity issue. So, it'd be nice if there was certain leeway in those rules. But
so we do know with at least with getting a license, I can't speak as far as for employment and stuff, as it trickles down the line, because again, we don't know everything. But I do know, like, the state and the legislature kind of went out of their way to make at least some convictions not enough to exclude you from the industry. And maybe, I know Charlana is really interested in this as well, so maybe I don't know, maybe you could take, you don't have to speak, but maybe you can go into more detail on this if you have anything.
No, from my understanding, they're willing to consider individuals with a record, but that can cause us problems down the road, depending on what they decide to do on the federal level. If they say someone cannot have a license that has a conviction, then how does that impact what happens down in the state later on down the road? That's all I know, is that they're willing to consider applicants that have a record.
There's been some, at the federal level, there's been some rules where they allow for expungement. And also in previous versions of reform bills, say the MORE Act in particular, payments to the federal government in the form of taxes need to go through the Treasury, and you can't get bonded if you have a felony conviction. And so they're trying to address this at the federal level, even when it comes to some of these proposed reforms. In a lot of states, there's it has to be a felony conviction, or it has to be a drug trafficking conviction in order to disqualify you from receiving a license or even a handler permit in some states. Oh, and I wanted to go back. I looked up on my tracker, the average revenue per retailer in New Jersey is slightly over $14 million. It actually ranks 5th nationally. And so if at 3%, that would be about $4.5 million per year at the local level. Or 2%. Yeah. Okay. So what, 2.8 million. But the average retailer in the United States only generates $2.4 million in revenue per year. And so New Jersey, because they've limited the licenses, they've given a greater opportunity for success. But that's been a trade-off with giving opportunities for other, operators. So there's a balance that needs to be stricken there.
Agreed. Plus our New Jersey prices are slightly higher based on the demand, right? So that'll probably even out a little bit as the market expands.
Yeah, that's the dynamic, the supply and demand dynamic. So as more and more mid-Atlantic states become legalized, deploy adult use programs, there'll be greater supply, or at least a greater balance between the supply and demand, and that will make prices a little bit lower, but it'll bring more people into the market because the consumer, based upon my elasticity of demand figures and analysis, consumers are extremely price sensitive. So having high fees, high taxes and the like actually is a disincentive towards legal participation. So being cognizant of your cost structure that you're imposing upon the operators, because they'll have to transfer that over to, as best they can, over to the consumer. Not having too high a cost structure will actually increase participation in the legal marketplace.
That makes a lot of sense. Mayor, if I can ask you to share your perspective, your vision, your thoughts on where we are. I know earlier we discussed it briefly in your introduction, but where do you see our township and the role that we are going to play in this market?
As I mentioned earlier, a lot of this, Council President, as you know, is going to depend on the final version that if and what would be ultimately approved by council. So we'll be guided by that document, but the administration's perspective at this point is to move forward cautiously. And I think it's important for the public that's on this, because we all hear a lot of speculation. The numbers we just talked about, this is important to move forward, but this is not going to be a financial windfall for the township. This is not going to, there's been a lot of talk around the country about all the money these states are making. So we're not doing this for the money, because based on some of the numbers that the experts just talked about, the township might make a couple $100,000. Not that that's not real money, but in the scheme of things, an $85 million annual budget, it's really not solving our problem. So I don't want the public to think, or this panel to think, that the administration is looking to move forward for financial reasons. That alone is not enticing enough. We just believe it's important, after years of discussion, and candidly, my position when Governor Murphy became elected and there was a lot of speculation it would be approved, the administration received calls weekly from people interested in coming to town. And I told them at the time that we were going to kind of be a wait and see type approach. And when that never went anywhere and ultimately went before a referendum, we said, okay, once that passed so overwhelmingly, we want to move forward. So I think besides that, as we all see changes and cultural shifts in our lifetime, we think it's important for the township to be responsive to what is ultimately public demand. And for those of us that they maybe grew up in a time where you're told not to smoke, things are clearly moving in a different direction. As the chief mentioned, the failed war on drugs was the generation I grew up on, the war on drugs. And here 30 years later, we're still talking about it. So we think it's important for a number of reasons, besides the revenue, not an important reason, but one of the reasons, besides the overwhelming support it received at the ballot, which is an important reason, but also to be part of what's clearly a shift in the public demand for these type of products. And maybe, as I mentioned earlier, to be an important component, as Chuck's talked about, in the planning perspective. When we have a couple redevelopment zones in town already, we have neighborhoods that are different from other neighborhoods. So where maybe some neighborhoods, it clearly would not be considered good planning to provide for cultivation uses or even dispensaries, there are other neighborhoods that clearly can benefit from that. So we're going to have to talk through all that as a town and see how it fits in the zoning, especially a town like West Orange. For those panelists who might not be familiar with the town, we have very distinct differences from neighborhood to neighborhood, and we have to kind of carefully craft how we're going to make that fit into our town. But we think it's important as we look to some redevelopment projects, as we look to moving the township into the next generation and the next phase. We think this is an important component of that. And I don't think there's any one reason that's overwhelmingly more important than the other. But I think when you look at all these considerations for our town to move forward, we think it's important, and we're going to submit an ordinance to the council and hope that that they'll pass it, and we'll get to work as soon as they do on figuring out where it is and how we're going to make it apply to our community.
I really appreciate that's a very thoughtful response, Mayor. To your point, yes, not one consideration is more important than the other. I did just want to share with the public and those and the panelists that in West Orange, almost 75% of the residents voted yes to question 1. And so that is a very overwhelming response. Not to state that those who opposed it, their considerations and their thoughts and concerns are not valid. Completely understand them and here to address them. And in that vein, I want to ask the question that is in the Q&A, and perhaps the chief, I'm going to put you on again. I see you're typing.
Okay.
I hate to interrupt your train of thought. Is West Orange looking to have an educational program on the effects of cannabis use in driving? You shared with me that you sat on a 2-hour, I think it was a workshop out of California. I don't know what the trend is. What do we as residents expect from our police department? What's the expectation of training when someone is pulled over for, I guess under the influence? Is that, I don't know what would be termed.
So I'll take that as a 2-part question, if that's
Yes.
okay. So I think as the police in the community, we have a moral and ethical responsibility to work with the schools to educate our young people that, this is a now legal substance that while you may be too young to engage in, it's going to be there when you are old enough. So that it's done responsibly. And we also can't be naive that, kids aren't going to get into this just as kids got into their liquor, their parents' liquor cabinets, or continue to from the time I was young and before and still today. So, we have to be realistic that this is going to occur. Now, with adults, we'd be more than happy to do any type of education campaign, real happy to see with the indoor gatherings and the mask mandates, we can finally get the Citizens Police Academy back off the ground that we've kind of had in the wings waiting to roll it out. And we can have a lesson block on that there. And, the importance of people understanding that just as, you shouldn't get behind the wheel of a car when you're drinking, you shouldn't, when you're ingesting marijuana. Just because it's legal doesn't mean you can be reckless with it. So now the other part of that question, I'm sorry, Council President, was
you shared with me that you did a training. I think it was out of California.
Yeah.
If you can speak to what the national trends are, what for policing in this space.
So the former sheriff that was one of the panelists, what he said, and it kind of rang true, was that he said, as a police officer, he was, involved with drug arrests and planning of drug arrests and overseeing sheriff's officers who made drug arrests. And, when it became legal, it was kind of like a quandary for him. But then he sort of thought about it and he said, well, I can either walk away and retire, or I can be a part of something. I care about the community. And I'd rather be a part of seeing that it's done right than just walking away and hoping that it's done right. And that kind of, rang home for me. In a healthy democracy, it's a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And as you just mentioned, over 70% of the people wanted this legalized. So I don't think that any one person or any organization, like even the State Chiefs Association, was vehemently opposed to it. And I never really kind of shared that view with them. I think that the people should govern. That's why they've elected people like you and the mayor on this panel to put the things in place that they want in place. If 70% of the population wants marijuana legalized, it should be legalized. And the police, the law enforcement role to be, is to ensure that it's done in a safe and effective manner. Interestingly, we will not be able to use the smell of marijuana on a motor vehicle stop, whereas you can with alcoholic beverages. So it's kind of, an interesting, I don't know if you want to call it a flaw, but it's an interesting element that's out there.
That is interesting but I would imagine that if someone has, let's say, left a dispensary or a wellness center, because that is also a concern that I have, right? There are resident renters who may live in subsidized housing, senior citizens who are subsidized as well in their housing, and any consumption could trigger an eviction. So if someone has to go to a wellness center or a facility to be able to consume, I would imagine that getting in their car, the odor would still be on their clothing. So it'd be difficult to.
So this was discussed the other day on that 2-hour presentation. And one of the things I thought of right away is Uber. Then I said, well, if you're in Section 8 housing, you may not be able to afford Uber. You may not have a credit card. But both Uber and Lyft have been very forward thinking with helping out people who are intoxicated at an alcohol serving bar to get home, without charges and so on, just to encourage people to not get behind the wheel. So I think it'd be pretty cool to be like one of the first in the state to start a program like that, maybe get Lyft and Uber and any other rideshare programs out there to say, like, if we do have a consumption type lounge, we can get people home, or we can get people to and from the retail establishments, so that these Section 8 people don't become an unintended consequence of federal laws. I mean, we're doing this for restorative justice. We don't want them to go home and get thrown out of their house and start over again.
Chief, I applaud you at how progressive you are in your thinking and your solutions. We at Terrescend have started a law enforcement where we go and we speak to law enforcement and we bring forth the laws as they stand. We bring forth samples of labeling that they should understand, because I think the communication between us as an industry and law enforcement benefits the community, because the more discussion that's out there, it helps everyone. And I love your idea of starting, a ride share or something like that for people. And I do think, I've been asked this constantly working in the industry, same as alcohol, there is a certain level of personal responsibility that has to come with this product. You wouldn't consume alcohol and get in a car, or you shouldn't. And the same goes for this product. And the more discussions we have like this, the better.
Thank you.
And as you said, personal responsibility. At the end of the day, if you injure or kill yourself or someone else or family member, I mean, it's not yourself. You have to live with that for the rest of your life. So, and that might be in a prison.
Yep.
So
Yep.
This isn't an opportunity to be reckless.
No, and it's an opportunity, like you said, to speak to the next generations. I'm a mom and I have 2 younger kids, and I speak openly to them. I speak to them about alcohol. I speak to them about, finding yourself in a dark alley. I speak to them openly about drugs, because it's a discussion that needs to be had,
Yes.
Yep.
And that's a responsible part of parenting.
Yep.
Diana, can I ask you to, and you just triggered this when we were talking the other day about those who already have a medicinal card,
Yep.
Not to get rid of them just because the adult use. Can you talk to that?
Sure. So there's still some benefits to having a medical card. For example, we have a shortage, and we're going to have a shortage for quite a while in product. The supply just isn't there because we don't have enough cultivators. So patients are our priority. We have been mandated by the DOH that patients are the priority. Even when adult use comes into play, patients come first. So the quality of product, the availability of product will go to patients first. They also get a tax break in regards to the product because they are a patient. So, I always tell people, because I have friends who are on the fence and, they qualify, there's 17 conditions in New Jersey and they qualify and they're like, should I just wait for it to become adult use? And I always explain that, like, you're still going to become a priority if you have that medical card.
Another thing about this is that there's reciprocity in other states. And so if you have a medical card and you go to Hawaii, for example, and, they have a reciprocity program, it's not as generous as, say, Nevada or anything, but, it's there nonetheless. And so you can still get your continuous care as a result of just having that card. Because consumers are so price sensitive, they do the calculations on the tax benefits associated with having a medical card. And if the tax benefits are great enough, then they'll keep their card because of that tax break. And if not, then they'll give it up. For example, in Colorado, pretty generous tax benefits associated with, and a low barrier to entry to get your card. And so there's a lot more patients. Whereas in Oregon, they had 84,000 patients at their peak, high barriers to entry now, not a great amount of tax benefit. And so there's only 22,000. And so, you see this and patients do that calculation. And they're very conscientious about it.
Thank you. And one last thing I want you to discuss, Diane, because, and I'm calling on Diane because Diane's Terrescend, the company she works for, does have that vertical license where they do have the grow, is it manufacturing and the dispensaries. Can you talk, I do see some of my council colleagues on. Thank you, council colleagues, for joining us as well. Can you talk to what a cultivation site is, what it looks like, and the smell? I know that is also a concern. Can you talk to that?
Sure. So we have a grow in Boonton Township, New Jersey. And it's funny because I was wondering the same thing prior to getting hired and prior to seeing it build out. It was an existing farm. We are the only ones that have a greenhouse as well as an indoor grow. And the process is really picture almost a factory in that workers come in, the people were worried about traffic. Well, that's no longer a concern because workers show up quietly, they park their car and they work their 8-hour, 10-hour shift, depending on what their day looks like. And they all leave in a nice quiet, there's no trucks coming back and forth, unlike a UPS, let's say, depot where you have constant traffic. We have it's a cultivation facility. So we have, it's like a farm. Picture like someone growing poinsettias, because that's what this previous farm used to grow. So you need, I used to actually go shopping there. It's not far from my home. So it's kind of interesting to see cannabis plants growing now. It is, an agricultural product. We water the plants, we take care of them. It's extremely, because it is medically grade, it's extremely clean facility. So unlike even a normal farm, we're adamant about the cleanliness of our facility. It is very, secure. Once again, we're mandated by the DOH. We have cameras everywhere. You have to have a badge to come on to the premise. If you're a visitor, you have to be logged in. We have security there constantly. So, you know, it's a quiet place. And it's not like, I'm always pleased when I bring a visitor in because they're surprised at what a, you know, what a well-run facility it is. Sorry, I'm having a, I'm losing my train of thought, but it's different than what I think people, like I had a town come in and they were like, oh, it's not a drug den. I'm like, no, it's a very, you know, it's a factory that happens to grow cannabis.
And can you talk about the smell?
Smell, we have, I know my company spent a lot of money on extra ways to mitigate the smell. So we put in these long towers to go above the property lines so that we could emit the smell up there. There's different filters that we use. We use charcoal filters. We use different levels of filters. So can you get a whiff once in a while? Yes, it's not pungent. Like I think what most people, you know, assume that it will smell like.
And what is a typical cost for a cultivation factory?
Oh, that I can't speak upon. I'm really not sure. I know it was in, you know, millions of dollars. I just don't know the facts and figures, so I don't want to misspeak.
Awesome. And I know that we also spoke with respect to, you had a presentation, and I'm hopeful that you're able to are you able to do a share screen?
Sure. If you'd like to see, hold on one second.
I hope my settings are.
Oh, disabled.
So they're not, I apologize.
That's okay. That's okay.
Oh God. But if you share the deck with me, I'll you know, be more than glad to share it with others.
I had emailed it to you. Would you like me? Hold on. Let me see if. Do you want to try once to see if you could allow share screening?
Let's see. Would that be in the settings? I don't know if it'll allow me to do that now because we're in the actual Zoom.
Okay.
So I will just look for your
Email. Sorry.
No, I apologize. I should have.
I know you had a crazy day. Life gets in the way.
Okay. Yeah, so I have it. Let me just bring it up and then I'll just screen share and you'll just walk. Okay.
You know, the cost of setting up a cultivation facility depends upon the size and capability. And so the square footage, essentially, it's not uncommon for a large commercial operation to run $2 million, you know, just for, but it really depends upon the amount of regulatory requirements associated with that. Because, you know, cameras, security, the number of safes, you know, there's just, and then you have your equipment, your filtering, your water and nutrient distribution, their soil. I mean, there's a lot to that goes into it. And so, and then you have your operating costs associated with electricity consumption, water, and then, you know, security. So, you know, I've been advising some of my clients, you know, between $1.5 million and $2 million. And you still need to plan on having some operating capital after that. And so that's why the access to banking and the like, and access to capital is so vitally important, because if you can reduce that or get greater access, then you give greater opportunities to others.
And someone had mentioned this before, that if towns don't go after the fees up front, because to your point, there's so much investment that has to come into the infrastructure first. We had to, it's a farm. We had to build the facility. We had to grow the plant, hire the people. And just now the money is starting to come in, but we're still paying off the debt. So I think a lot of municipalities have to keep that in mind, that, you know, this is a business that relies on a plant to do well. And a lot has to come, you know, it's not like a liquor store where you could buy the product and then sell it right off the shelves. You're growing it. So, you know, it does take a lot of investment up front.
Well, I think too with, speaking on the 2019, and Chuck, I'm sure you'll agree, those applicants that have been holding on to property. And, here in New Jersey, there's for a cultivating facility, which is like a warehouse setting in a light industrial park. Some applicants have an LOI out or have purchased the building or anticipate on purchasing a building, which to Beau's point is, depending on the square footage, millions and millions of dollars. And from a retail perspective, if an applicant is holding on their retail space, this is all something that we're going on 2 years now for these future applicants. And it's a lot of money. It's certainly a lot of money. And this is, at the state level, just based on waiting for those awardees to be announced.
I'm going to thank you for that, Jacqueline, because that is a good perspective to start from. It's not something that the town council is going to be able to, approve an ordinance and, within a few months' time, dispensaries will pop up. It's quite some time before any of that happens. And after we do, I do the screen share, I want Mark to share just the process and the timeline for us to have to pass the ordinance and the reasons why. Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen and hopefully it is here. Let me do it from here. All right, Diana.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for letting me introduce the Apothecarium to West Orange, New Jersey. Terrescend is the company that I work for. The Apothecarium, you could go to the next one. Sorry. The Apothecarium is our parent company. We're a Canadian company. Our retail brand is Terrescend is our parent company. The Apothecarium is our dispensary brand name. We purchased this in 2019 because it's a very, very high-end brand. It comes from California. It was started by 3 cousins and 2 family members. And we really take pride in how high end it is. It is like if you walk into one of our dispensaries, especially the one in Maplewood, you'll feel like you're in a high end jewelry store. Yeah, thank you. We take great pride in that. Terrescend, New Jersey is our cultivation center in Boonton Township, New Jersey. We have other brands within our parent company, but Kind Tree is our product name that we sell product in Pennsylvania and New Jersey.
I'll move to the next slide, I think.
Yes, please. So hello, hi, and welcome. That's our dispensary. Sorry, it's harder when someone else is running the ship. I'm used to driving. So as the founder of the Apothecarium said, we aim to build a dispensary that you will be proud to bring your mom to. Our goal is to put first-time visitors at ease in a beautiful atmosphere with friendly and knowledgeable staff. And we really do take pride in that because, especially for our medical patients, sometimes they come in and they're not certain. They feel like it's a little taboo. And they have the opportunity to sit down with a wellness associate and really go over their conditions and what would serve them best. So as I mentioned, we're vertically integrated which once again means that with our license that we're holding, we could grow, we could distribute and produce. So we have a lab. We're already making vape carts. We're going to be making lozenges, whatever the DOH or the CRC approves. We're medically focused. We take great pride in education, which is one of the things that my role really involves. I do seminars on the advantages of medical cannabis. Now I'm talking to law enforcement. We want to have an open conversation with the community. This is what our waiting room, our reception area at the Apothecarium in Maplewood looks like. I should have included a picture of what the inside looks like, but I kind of like the surprise aspects. I'm hoping that the panelists on this call take me up on a visit.
It's really an incredible place.
Yeah. So we converted an old gym actually into this space. And this is what the front of the building looks like. We are restricted by the DOH in regards to signage. So it's very minimal signage. So we're not like, you know, blaring in your face. We fit right into the neighborhood. Building the community on operational integrity, quality, and trust. That is something that we stand for. In New Jersey, we're working to maximize positive impact through our cannabis cultivation facility and medical cannabis dispensaries. Our focus is to improve access to quality medical cannabis and education for patients in a welcoming, non-judgmental environment. That is key, the non-judgmental as well, because like I mentioned, if you have an elderly person that comes into your space and has never, you know, had their college experience, you want to treat them with respect and you want to give them the knowledge that they need. We proudly grow in Boonton Township, New Jersey. Our facility includes a 37,000 square foot greenhouse. The new construction expanded our capacity to 148,000 square feet and added 40,000 square feet of indoor cultivation and post-harvest manufacturing capabilities. So it's a big space. It's a beautiful space. It's well manicured, same as our dispensaries. We take pride when you pull up. I'm a photographer by hobby. I love taking pictures of our space because we keep it so well.
Diana, is the picture on the bottom right, is that's the greenhouse?
That is the greenhouse. That is the greenhouse, yes.
Is there also outdoor cultivation?
No.
Okay,
no.
all right. I saw all those plants. I thought that is a large
footprint. We're not using that entire footprint.
Okay.
That's the picture of the entire greenhouse as it stands. The way we purchased it, we're using only a section of it.
Awesome.
So the New Jersey Medical Cannabis Program is there to provide access to medical cannabis for patients with serious medical conditions. Currently, we have over 100,000 patients in the medical program in New Jersey. It's also meant to promote high quality research into cannabis's effectiveness in treating serious medical conditions. We have over 1,000 recommending doctors in New Jersey. They all have to be certified through the DOH. So they're all registered with the DOH as well. I'm hoping that the research actually now with more and more legalization, I feel like there has not been enough research into what cannabis can actually help in. People know, people talk about it, but it just would be nice to have concrete scientific evidence, which I know is out there.
Diana, earlier in the questions, and I'm sorry I missed it. I recall someone's asking where they can access a medical card from. Where can they find the registered physicians? Is there a directory at the DOH?
Yes, there is. My company, we host we host events on virtual events every 2 weeks, and we make it very easy. So if you go into the apothecary of nj.com, it's very easy to go under events and register. It allows the patients to upload their medical forms, and we have doctors we work with, and it's only $150 fee, which is the cheapest in the state for a year. And it's just conducive to, doing it from your home and nice and easy. And on the DOH, you can also look how to obtain a medical card. I could also provide you with the link to add.
That would be great, just so that I can share that out.
Sure. There's 17 qualifying conditions in New Jersey in order to receive a medical cannabis card. But I'll share my own personal story. Mine isn't up there. I suffer from insomnia. But what happens when mom doesn't sleep? She becomes anxious. And so my doctor prescribed it for me for anxiety. The most common conditions are chronic pain, anxiety, and PTSD. I'm now speaking to these seminars at police stations, more and more officers wish that it was available to them because either for the chronic pain that they experience or PTSD. So that's something that's a point of conversation that I have at all police stations is, their restricted use.
I've presented to some law enforcement agencies outside of New Jersey, and they're looking at allowing for some form of cannabinoid treatment, which is technically cannabis, and trying to get allowances for that because there's a anti-anxiety and anti-inflammation, which leads to pain. So
Oh, yeah.
Some law enforcement agencies are looking at adding this as part of their healthcare programs.
They're
And so,
afraid. They're
yeah.
afraid right now, because they feel like if they do, then they're not going to have, they're going to be penalized, but they also know that it would help them greatly. So, even CBD, they're afraid to try CBD products because what if it comes up in their testing? Yeah. And they could lose
This
their
is
livelihood.
CBD based. Right,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep. What is medical cannabis? Cannabis has a long history as a medical plant and is one of the world's oldest cultivated plants. Cannabis is full of compounds called cannabinoids and terpenes. Medical researchers usually focus on the health effects of two cannabinoids, THC and CBD. THC is a substance that can make you feel euphoric, while CBD is a powerful anti-inflammatory agent that doesn't have intoxicating effects. Terpenes also play a leading role in medical cannabis as they determine the aroma, smell, and greatly influence the medical properties. So, you have, or every fruit and vegetable and food has terpenes that give it the smell and taste. In 1985, pharmaceutical companies received approval to develop THC preparations for therapeutic use. And as a result, cannabinoids were reintroduced into the mainstream healthcare system. How does it work? Medical cannabis works by impacting the endocannabinoid system we all have in our bodies. Pretty much it's a lock and key effect, which means that the cannabis unlocks the endocannabinoid system and it just really allows people to go in a level state.
Went back, sorry.
I think I muted myself. Cannabinoids, the general name of a class of chemical compounds that naturally occur in cannabis. Some boost psychoactivity, while others may provide medical benefits. So this is a question that we get asked often. What are our dispensary hours? We go adhere to town ordinances for operating hours. So we look in Phillipsburg, which is where our first dispensary we opened in New Jersey. We looked at what the town allows and we work with the town. Now in Maplewood, these are the hours that are conducive to their town ordinances. Questions regarding operations. We have strict COVID measures. We follow the New Jersey Department of Health guidelines, including sanitation procedures, temperature checks prior to entering the building, and masks for staff and patients. When you're a patient, check-in is required, proper identification and medical cannabis card, and checking for allotment. The checking for allotment and your medical cannabis card happens both at registration and back when you go to purchase your product with a wellness associate. Consultations are available upon request with a wellness associate. We have private consultation rooms where that can take place. Patients have the ability to pre-order and pick up, which shortens their visit time. We have in Maplewood rapid pickup, and soon we're going to be allowing for curbside pickup as well. The typical visit for each patient is about 10 minutes. Most patients go online prior to visiting and check out what's on the menu. Also, we have iPads throughout the facility where if they're waiting in the reception hour, waiting room, they could check to see what the availability is on the menu. Will we transition to adult use? It depends on the approval of the town. Maplewood is very open, and the mayor, everyone, town council is very, they're very pro adult use. So the answer is yes. We are going to assess our ability to serve our patients first, as that is our highest priority. When will this happen? You know, I cut and paste this, I'll be honest, from the CRC website, but I've been told that it's sometime in the fall. So we're not sure. We're not sure when adult use will happen. Jacqueline might be able to answer that question. I don't know who can answer that question, but we're waiting for the rules and laws to be written. And in New Jersey, over 67% of adults voted to legalize adult use.
Wow.
And so these are some of the things that we do to become better partners within the community that we are, that we have locations in. In Boonton Township, we grow a garden on our site and donate the produce to our local food pantry. We offer employment opportunities within our community. Maplewood in particular, and in Phillipsburg, we hired greatly from the local town. We work with local food pantries by volunteering and hosting donation events, becoming actively involved with veteran organizations. That's something we take great pride in. Participating in local charities, including social services, the Fireman's Home, animal shelters, and local toy drives. We host a variety of educational programs, such as how to become a patient, medical MJ research, and impact on medical conditions, product usage, and patient certification. And we sponsor health events such as free yoga events open to the public. So one of the things that I do as community outreach is I really put myself out there and look to the communities that we're in for suggestions and ways to get involved. And we take pride in that. Thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you for putting that together. And I just want to say, because I don't want any misperceptions about sharing the presentation, I just wanted to have my council colleagues understand what this type of a license looks like, what the potential of moving forward for us looks like, and setting the bar real high with the Tiffany of dispensaries, as far as I'm concerned, is the direction I hope that if we move forward, that we move in that direction. And that Terrescend only has 3 licenses, and they're about to open their third and last license. So this is not a sales pitch. I just wanted to share how the process works and how we should look forward to moving in what direction. So thank you, Diana, for sharing that with us.
Councilwoman Brown,
Yes.
if I might interrupt for 1 second.
Sure.
So Terrescend was one of a dozen entities that a town in Central Jersey had endorsed in their Central Jersey application. They obviously won in North Jersey. And I say this because, it was important for us as we were thinking about supporting cannabis industries, the mayor and council and everybody, that when somebody would come to us, they'd come to us with a presentation that was medically driven, thoughtful, and we were all comfortable knowing that we were going to have a solid partner to work in our community. So the one thing that I've been working on, in addition to the nuts and bolts of just pure zoning, is what does your application intake process look like? And so when you look at this, don't just look at zoning, but look on how you get courted and how you ask for presentations. What are they offering the community? How are, what is that? What is the company going to look like when they get there? All those things matter. And I think right now, with the way you have control over not only the where, but the how, you can protect yourself and ensure that you don't just open up your zoning and get 20 cannabis companies. but you target and you say, okay, these are the requirements we're putting on as a community. And so we're going to go with, maybe your application process in 2021 only looks at a handful of license supports. Maybe it's in support of certain categories. So look at those things and have real conversations about how you're comfortable moving forward. And I think under the leadership that you guys, both the mayor and yourself, have presented today, that the town's in really good hands as to how it's going to move forward.
Thank you for that. And that's exactly what I wanted to, that the presentation to share, that, it's not just the process, not just the welcoming, but the vetting process, and what are they going to, how are they going to be good community partners? Certainly look forward to that. Mark, can you share in the final minutes that we have left, just the timeline? Because I don't want to, I want to discourage the thought or any narratives that, we rush through things, but
Right.
can you walk us through the process?
If you can recall, we had discussed the similar issues when it came to medical marijuana dispensaries. So obviously that became sort of a starting point to look at. Once the referendum passed, rightly so, we had to look at what we had done so far and say, okay, well, now we got to expand it and kind of address it. So the way that the state statute is set up, all municipalities within the state of New Jersey essentially have a deadline of August 21st, 2021, in which they need to decide how they want to address zoning for commercial cannabis businesses. What the statute sets up is basically a default zoning set, which basically says that if a town does nothing after August 21st, cannabis businesses will be allowed in industrial zones as permitted uses, and that dispensaries will be allowed in retail and commercial zones as conditional uses. So that was sort of treated as the starting point. So if a municipality decides not to do anything, that will go into effect August 21st. So we started with that. Some of the other issues that were raised during this panel were other issues that were essentially what the draft ordinance does is this really does four things. One, it kind of cleans up West Orange's local ordinances, essentially confirming the decriminalization of cannabis products, so that it exempts all legal cannabis products that are allowed through either the medical marijuana statute or the commercial marijuana statute. So that's the first thing it does, which automatically goes into effect because of the adoption of the state statute. The second thing it does is it addresses zoning. This is probably the biggest main thing that every municipality is going to have to address, where they want to allow it, how they want to basically regulate location of where these things are going to be. Really, the way that it's established, it's going to be very similar to how most businesses in West Orange are treated zoning wise. They're not going to be, just like you can't open up a convenience store in a residential area. They're limited to certain zones. What the draft currently that we have, what it does is it treats cannabis, any sort of cannabis establishment, as a conditional use, limited to industrial zones. But for dispensaries and direct retail places, they're going to be conditional uses in commercial zones as well. So anywhere that there's no business. What we also do is we create a local licensing framework. The state statute allows municipalities to, in addition to address the zoning issues, to basically have their own local licenses. The way that this was through sort of discussions and questions and comments, that I basically what we did was we created a licensing process after the state's process. So what would generally happen would be once an entity receives a license from the state, if they were looking to open up any sort of establishment in West Orange, they would have to apply through the township for a local license. This is similar to what a lot of other cities are doing as well. The reason for that is ultimately like I said, most other businesses in West Orange have some sort of licensing requirements. This would be no different. There would be there are applications, and most of it is essentially resubmitting to the town what they've probably already created and submitted to the state for their licensing already. So there is a lot of redundancy in our local ordinances that reflects what's required under the state and will likely be required under the regulatory system. But it just allows the town to kind of say, hey, listen, to have a say in, what's happening and making sure that all of our conditions are being met as well. The third thing it does is it basically implements a use and transfer tax. Again, similar to what's the state statute allows for it. We've just similarly codified it so that it would be a 2% use transfer tax on all transfers except for the 1% exception that was previously discussed before. And that's pretty much it. There's obviously policy questions that have to be decided. There's going to be a cap on the number of licenses, local licenses that the Township of West Orange will basically approve. However, one of the things that was important was that there was an emphasis on encouraging the micro businesses. So any micro businesses that have been licensed by the state will be exempt from any cap that the town local ordinance establishes. So essentially, if you're a micro business that's been licensed by the state, you can apply for, you're never going to be locked out essentially. So I don't know whether there's any specifics you want me to get into or just any specific questions. That's just sort of brought over a bit.
No, I just wanted the public to understand the process by which we're moving forward and the timeline within.
Right. So the August 24th, like I said, the August 21st date is important because if the township does nothing or fails to adopt something, the statute basically says that their sort of default settings will go into place and the town really can't do anything about it for a period of 5 years. So, the town has to do something. So they have to act. So that's what this ordinance will address essentially. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. And we're right at the 8 o'clock mark. You just hit that mark. I know that's funny. Yes, Jacqueline.
I just wanted to mention one other thing about the ordinance that I know. So GTI is in Patterson, and part of what they discussed with the town or the city is to hire a large majority of the employees within this the city. So something to think about. I know Diana's presentation was amazing, and I just wanted to touch on that. Might be something West Orange might want to consider.
So one of the things that the state statute does is there was talk about what's called impact zones. The interesting thing though is under the statute, there are literally only 4 cities in all of New Jersey that qualify as impact zones. Patterson happens to be one of them. It's basically Newark, Jersey City, Patterson, and Elizabeth. Those are the only 4 municipalities that are going to qualify for those type of impact zone abilities. So, that's why, we don't really address it in ours because we wouldn't qualify under the definition anyway.
Well, I think you can still, you're the attorney, so I'll take your lead.
Right.
But I think there could be something, you discuss with any of the current operators. And as Chuck mentioned, the presentation, what the operator or potential operators is offering is so important. And you hope that there's some sort of, community, not just outreach, but the job availabilities are there for the constituents of the town.
Absolutely. Moving forward, definitely something to consider. I just want to say thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time out to have this fireside chat, if you will, just to kind of help us move along in the process. And I do want to say, I think Diana and Chuck mentioned earlier that, we do have a leadership team that includes very open-minded, very progressive, I would say. Well, maybe not so progressive, but very progressive in this space to help our community move forward. You know, our chief, and I always, you know, applaud him and thank him publicly because he is very proactive in all of the things that help our town become a much better place to be. So always very grateful for his proactivity. And the mayor, thank you for always giving us your time. He too ran from a proclamation to this session, so I really do appreciate. And Mark, I know you're never ever home, so hopefully you can log off and go home after this. And to all the panelists, thank you for your time, your information. It's invaluable as we move forward. And to the public who joined us, if you have any questions, please continue to reach out to the mayor, to the chief, to myself and my council colleagues. And hopefully we'll be able to pass an ordinance that is going to be in the best interest of the township. So thank you all once again, and I wish everyone a good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
President, thank you.
You're very welcome. Good night, all.
Yep, take good care.